Hello, Texas, and welcome to a candid conversation about what powers modern life. If you're looking for facts about our energy landscape and how oil and natural gas provides energy security for our state, nation, and allies around the globe, you've come to the right place. This is TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight. Welcome back to TXOGA Talks, a podcast brought to you by the Texas Oil and Gas Association. I'm Todd Staples. I serve as president of TXOGA, and I'm so happy to visit with you about issues that impact the oil and natural gas industry and the great state of Texas. Now, this winter season, we're still in it, even though it doesn't feel like it at times. Texas underwent Winter Storm Fern, a winter storm event that gripped much of Texas with sub-freezing temperatures for a few days. Kids were out of school. They like that. And parents, not so much every day. But the thing about Winter Storm Fern, you probably have read or heard different stories. And in those stories, you might have heard terms like freeze-offs, storage draws, power mix. Well, I want to drill down on the facts today that tell the undeniable truth about natural gas and the role that it played. I'm joined with me today by TXOGA's chief economist, Dr. Dean Foreman. Dr. Foreman is a highly sought-after speaker. He's an expert on these issues, and he's able to look at the facts, kind of pull back the curtain a little bit so that we can look at the details and how policy impacts those details and how those policies ultimately impact markets. And so we want to look at how the infrastructure actually performed, the role of natural gas in supporting the electric grid. We want to look at the story of resilience and why that matters for every single Texan. And so, Dr. Foreman, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again. As we've been crunching the numbers, they really tell a compelling story of grit for the whole energy system.
Well, I knew that you would have a really good information to talk about today, and I want to start with production. And whenever a storm like Fern hits, there's always immediate speculation. You know, there's immediate speculation about production drops, what causes that to happen. And I think the storm that we're looking at is the January 23rd to the 26th are the real days of impact. So let's just start out looking at what the supply side actually looked like during that time frame.
There's some regional variation, but statewide, the drop, depending upon exactly when we look, was between 7 and 10%, not more than that. And that compares, if we were going back to Winter Storm Uri in 2021, we saw more than a third of natural gas offline at different points. So this is pretty remarkable performance.
So that is a big difference between 7 and 10% and, a third of our entire gas production. Some of the riders that I've looked at, Dean, suggest this decline in production on the gas side was avoidable. Were you surprised by this decline, and should consumers be worried?
I wasn't really surprised by it, given the improvements that have been made over the last 4 or 5 years. Winterization, so really making the system robust to colder weather is part of it. Mm-hmm. Critical load designation. So after Senate Bill 3 and legislature passed in June 2021, we've seen continued designation of anything in the natural gas supply chain as called critical load. So that means we can't take natural gas, critical components of the supply chain offline from electricity during storms. And that continuity has really helped the performance of production.
So maintaining that power is key to begin with. Well, some of the writings that I've read, though, seems to indicate that there shouldn't be any decline in production, that 0% is the only acceptable number. How realistic is that?
Completely unrealistic. I mean, just the natural flow of molecules through the system, it's going to move slower. It's just going to happen as things freeze. There's going to be some, for safety reasons, if it's sub-freezing weather, you just need to shut some wells in. So as that happens, that's natural, but that's what storage is for, and that's the role it serves.
That's a good point, and I definitely want to talk about storage, but to your point, these systems are mechanical systems. They're in the field, just like automobiles run up and down the road regularly, but we have garages, auto mechanic garages all over the state, because there are inevitable failures that you cannot plan ahead for, and so that does occur in the production of oil and natural gas as well. But the reality of what I'm seeing, and the takeaway with a slight decline, is that Texas is winter ready. and that the natural gas system is winter ready as well. It's not just about the equipment, it's about the personnel. And it's about pre-positioning these teams, these response teams that are out there before the storm hits, and that's gone really well. Now, you mentioned storage, and I kind of think storage is the unsung hero. And a lot of people think about storage today. They think about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, right? The SPR, which is a government-funded storage program for oil. But natural gas is different. The reason we don't have a government mandated one is because natural gas goes all over the places. And it has to be done in real time. So this is all privately funded storage that we're talking about. So tell us, how did this storage perform when the storm spiked and it was needed the most?
So in the peak hours, you were withdrawing out of storage up to 12.8 billion cubic feet per day. And as context, the state as a whole only produces about 28 billion cubic feet per day. So remarkable. And if we were looking at the statistics of how much the system technically could take out, from the Railroad Commission's data, it's capable of delivering over 20 billion cubic feet per day. So at just under 13, we drew on it. We drew on it at a healthy clip. That's an amazing amount of energy being reinjected back into the system, but it didn't push the system limits at all.
Well, so storage does play a big role. And what we're talking about today, folks, is that storage is designed to be there with the known expectation that production is going to decline at some level, and different circumstances determine how big and steep a decline that is. And the industry has weatherized, the industry is using personnel and pre-positioning them, but you're still going to have it. So supply, having that storage is key. And again, this is the private market investing to be able to respond when it's needed. But Dean, let me ask you, just because that gas is there, does it mean it's going to be available to power generators?
Absolutely. I mean, you've got the ability through the contractual arrangements to secure the gas, whether you're an industrial provider or a power provider. And if you know you need it, you may choose for savings to take something that's interruptible on a contract instead of firm, basically guaranteeing your supply. But if you need it, you have to basically secure that commercially, and they do.
And what you're saying, if it's interruptible, that just means the very common definition of it, your supply can be interrupted. The contrary of that, if it's a firm commitment and you're paying for that, then you are more likelihood that that's going to be delivered to you. Just like if you're renting a hotel room, folks, if you show up at midnight, you may or may not have a room, right? And the price could be real low because they have a lot of vacancies, or it could be really high because they don't have one or two rooms left. Is that a fair analogy to use in the natural gas reservation system to some degree?
It's a good analogy, and it's what you should expect if you show up at midnight, unless you call ahead and say, I'm arriving late, right?
Yeah.
And the important thing for gas is that the system's really planned this way. The contracts may explicitly embed things about storage and the delivery of the gas from storage to where it needs to be in that arrangement. So this is part and parcel of how the industry works. It's the way they expect. And the system isn't designed to deliver that gas, if you will, at peak 100%. It's expecting that you're going to take production year round, put some in storage, and draw on that storage seasonally when you need it.
So the good news here, folks, is that the natural gas supply system is working as intended. It's working very well. Texans are better off because of it. And during winter storms and our electrical system, it's different from our natural gas supply system. Those are two different entities. They have different purposes. Much of our electricity system is a monopoly, like our utilities, where they're delivering that to you. So, and that's done through ERCOT for most Texans. ERCOT is different from other things, the other grid operators from throughout the country that you might hear about. And let's pivot and just talk about our electric grid and ERCOT. So temperatures dropped, electricity demand increased, load went up. What were some of those numbers and how did that look?
So the load really increased, over 50%. So we went from roughly 50 gigawatts of load or demand in excess of 75 at the peak there. So that's a big swing, and it was really made possible by dispatchable energy led by natural gas.
Well, let's talk about where that power came from, because there's a power mix. Isn't that a fair way to talk about our electrical generation? There's a power mix. And tell us what part was from natural gas or renewables or just more dispatchable power sources.
Great point. That mix, it really changes based on those weather conditions. So, ordinarily you would have some pretty strong renewables from wind and solar in Texas, but as that storm hit, a lot of that dissipated and dropped off. And then, of course, depending upon the time of day, solar is going to drop off anyway. We saw on average between January 23rd and 6th, about half, 51% of the energy came from natural gas.
Wow.
It was over 70% at peak. And the same comparison for looking at dispatchable, we had basically 3/4 of the energy on average coming from dispatchable thermal sources like gas, coal, nuclear, and at peak in some hours, over 93%.
Wow. We hear about natural gas being discussed as a bridge fuel from time to time, but it sounds like the cornerstone fuel for the Texas ERCOT system that makes certain that power keeps on 24/7 and that is fueling a big part of our energy mix.
You got it. It's not just a bridge in the sense that volumetrically it's providing that quantum power, but the flexibility, the ability to ramp that extreme from, if we take that swing of 50 to 75 gigawatts, that difference of 25 gigawatts, that's the entirety of the power delivery in California or Texas in November. I mean, it's a huge swing.
Wow, that is big. Folks, the reason why we're going into depth like this on Winter Storm Fern, the natural gas system, ERCOT, is because this affects your life. And policymakers make decisions, regulators make decisions about these systems, and we want you to be educated. We want you to be informed, because we've discussed in other programs about the need to vote, the need to be participating in this system and asking policymakers their views. And when we come back from our break to listen to our sponsor, we're going to dig a little bit deeper and give you some important information. So stay with us and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Neil Carlton, president of the TXOGA Insurance Agency. The TXOGA Insurance Agency is pleased to sponsor today's episode of the TXOGA Talks podcast. TXOGA members have access to the TXOGA Safety Group with Texas Mutual and get a premium discount of 12.4%, as well as the possibility to earn 2 dividends. Participants also have access to unique safety tools to keep their team safe and on the job. Visit TXOGAinsurance.com for more information.
And we're back with Dr. Dean Foreman, Chief Economist for the Texas Oil and Gas Association. We've covered a lot about Winter Storm Fern, and we want to talk about coordination. We've been discussing some of the more tangible aspects of it, but today I want to kind of pivot a little bit and pick up on some big lessons we learned from Winter Storm Uri. Winter Storm Uri was the big storm in 2021, which for about a week we were out, and so many people were without power because we lost electricity to our natural gas systems that had a cascading effect. I think our power generators were not as winterized as they are today. That was the big reason, I think, that we lost power. So we've discussed a lot of that. And I think post-Uri assessments made clear that there was a breakdown in coordination. And there was a breakdown in communication between industries. So, Dean, if you could just tell us what's changed since then that's made a difference?
The process is completely different. So we have a structured, real-time, continuous dialogue going on between industry, Texas Department of Emergency Management, Texas Department of Transportation, the PUC, and ERCOT, all of them coordinating and sharing real-time information on things like storage availability, the flows of natural gas, what the load is. So that coordination has really made a night and day difference since 2021.
Well, you mentioned some very key state agencies that are important. They work extremely hard to deliver for Texans. There's also another main coordinating entity that I was a little skeptical of in the beginning. Would it really matter? But it's called TERC, TERC, Texas Energy Reliability Council. What role does TERC play in that process of the agencies that you mentioned?
TERC's basically like the command center. They're kind of bringing it all together and coordinating things. So think of, we just got past the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Your offensive, defensive coordinators that are really making the systems work together. So Turk's played that role very effectively.
Well, it's good to see that occur because you have private industry that calls into the Turk calls as well, power generators, utilities, and the natural gas operators and midstream companies that are producing and transporting that makes a real difference. Now, we've bragged a lot on our system during Winter Storm Fern and how little natural gas was displaced. I don't think that there were any emergencies in Texas. Is that right?
That's right.
So there were no emergencies. There were no load shed events to where ERCOT is telling people, their utilities, you've got to cut people's power off. So that's good news. But yet people still lost power, Dean. What about those folks that are listening to this that were without power if we're bragging on the system so well? What happened there?
So these emergency alerts, that's really when the amount of spare power on the grid gets critically low. And that's shedding of load to basically avoid a critical failure. We didn't get anywhere close to that. In fact, we haven't had an emergency alert 3, as it's called, since 2021. In terms of the system, if we kind of break out what transmission is as opposed to local conditions or local distribution, think of transmission as like your highways that are delivering power across the state, and then your local distribution is getting the power down to neighborhoods, localities, your home. As heavy ice builds up on trees, lines effectively they may fall as a result of that. And that breakage can be local conditions, local neighborhoods, transformers that get affected. That's not the system, the grid, the transmission lines going down. That's worked very effectively. And I think the work actually in improving the resilience of the local grid, the local distribution, has also improved relative to 2021. But that's growth in progress, making sure that lines are clear, that foliage isn't ready to bring those down. Those are the kinds of things that are preparation for winter storms.
I think those are good points for us to think about and consider as we think about our lives during these storms. And it's analogous, I think, also to the natural gas system. So on the utilities, if you lost power because of limbs fell on lines, we do see power crews out there cleaning and clearing all the time.
Routinely.
But there inevitably something happens. And these are just outdoor conditions. We slip and fall sometimes, right, when we're walking along because we just don't plant our foot just right. And we try to be careful and minimize those conditions, but sometimes things do happen. So the grid itself was stable during Fern, and fundamentally, I guess things were just different this time than they were during Winter Storm Uri, if we're trying to compare the two.
Yeah, and we referred to it earlier, but let's unpack a little bit about what's fundamentally different from 2021. The natural gas system back in 2021, it depended upon electricity for moving a lot of that natural gas, whether it's compressor stations, pipelines, the ability to get the gas to market. And it was not considered critical load at that point. In fact, was explicitly excluded from that classification. That change that we talked about with Senate Bill 3 back in 2021 has made it so that gas isn't losing power as part of that. And that system resiliency, the ability to deliver natural gas despite sub-freezing temperatures, is the big change.
Well, these are things that benefit consumers. I read an article with RBN Energy, some folks that I think a lot of, and they talked about pipelines and power generators doing things to mitigate difficulties. Pipelines are preemptively line packing. They're putting as much gas as they can possibly put in those lines in the expectation that it's going to be needed. That's a risk on them. That's private enterprise. And so if that's not used, then they just lose out, but they're anticipating and they think that it could. And they also see that a lot of generators that have the ability are planning for dual fuels. They can switch if for some reason they didn't contract for firm delivery of natural gas, they can switch to diesel that they might have on site and even use LNG in their facilities at some time. So I think those are all plus factors that benefit consumers and protect us in a really big way.
Those are plus factors. I think I'd add the system's deliverability, both in terms of pipelines. We've talked separately about 22 billion cubic feet per day of pipelines under construction right now in the state. Pipeline delivery continues to expand. The amount of storage in the state, some 900 billion cubic feet of gas, that's up 15% compared to 2021. So the system growth, it's responding to the fundamental economic and demographic growth, the system energy needs. All of that is really working in concert.
Folks, it's great to be an American. It's great to be a Texan because we see markets reacting and responding like Dr. Foreman has discussed, increasing supply, increasing demand withdrawal capabilities. And these are all done. They're privately funded. No one's saying it must be done a certain way, because if it was done that way, then it would be a much less risky system. You'd see capital flee and go elsewhere. There's another distinction that we've talked about previously on different shows. Winter Storm Uri, there was no critical designation of natural gas supply chain. Winter Storm Fern, Winter Storm Fern, there was a designation. So explain a little bit about that designation as critical load and what that means.
Well, I think it's really good to reiterate this point because it is the key change from 2021, where if you're critical load, you will not be interrupted with your electric power during a winter emergency.
Unless something really odd happens, right? Yeah.
And to be clear, prior to 2021, natural gas, a compressor station, for example, in the supply chain, was not considered. It was explicitly excluded. That change with Senate Bill 3 in 2021 has really included natural gas and improved the continuity of the entire supply chain. We do not get shut off now, and we do deliver. And you've seen, outside of the physical response, the 7 to 10% drop that we saw during the coldest periods, that's really minor. And the fact that we have so much greater deliverability out of the storage system, the pipelines, that's really helped natural gas be able to serve, again, on average, more than half of power during that winter storm, and as much as 70%.
It should be comforting to know that there's more natural gas produced in Texas than we use on a daily basis. We supply other states. We supply other countries. There's a huge build out of LNG facilities along the Texas Gulf Coast. And that's because of this system and our form of economy that encourages this to occur. And consumers are certainly the benefit. Now, we're coming to the end. I do want to discuss an element, though, that you're reading about in the paper. So, Dr. Foreman, we're hearing a lot about AI. We're hearing a lot about data centers. There are some communities that are saying, well, we don't want the data center in our community because it uses too much water, it uses too much electricity. What are your views on the ability of our system to respond and meet the water needs, meet the power needs of the new demand that's coming to Texas? Is this something that we need to run away from, or we need to run toward?
We need to run toward, but in a smart way with some foresight, planning, and good policy that supports infrastructure and the expansion of both generation and transmission to support a system that's resilient. In the way we look at it, if there are places where that if you add load considerably, that maybe that congests or pushes the system beyond its limits. Mm-hmm. But there are other opportunities where it can be complementary, where you can co-locate some generation along with the data facility that comes, where it serves both the data center's needs, helps Texas economy grow, but really is complementary with the energy system where natural gas is produced and how it's delivered. So it takes some smart planning and coordination, but it looks like policymakers are on the right track.
Yeah, I think they're being very aware of the concerns of the public about these new capabilities. But folks, we need to be independent as a state and a nation. We need to make certain that we're energy secure. We need to make certain that the technological advancements are occurring in the United States of America, not overseas, where countries don't always have our best interest at heart. And so we want to use the natural resources that we have and to build our infrastructure systems. And this means more jobs, more opportunities, better quality of life, more hospitals, more doctors, because we can continue to expand our overall infrastructure as our basic energy needs are met and as we grow. So I'm excited about the future, and I'm excited that I can do more home repairs with more artificial intelligence capabilities. And I'll learn real quickly, Dean, when I talk to my AI partner on my phone, if I want to attempt this repair, if I just want to do the smart thing and call a repairman right up front, but it gives me those options. And many homeowners, my point is your lives are improving because of these data centers and these AI options, and we just need our infrastructure to keep up. And I really appreciate Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Speaker Burrows, members of the Texas House and Senate, and our Public Utility Commission, and the board members at ERCOT and staff there who are all working to address these challenges. And they're challenges. These require a lot of planning, a lot of foresight. There's some expenses associated with it that have to be paid by consumers. But the more consumers we have, which Texas keeps adding people because we're the best place to live and work and raise a family of anywhere in the world, that means we have more people that can help pay these costs. Dr. Foreman, you do a great job of digging in on these systems. We are glad that you've been here with us today, and we may come back in the future and get you to talk about what kind of increased demand you're seeing, low demand you're seeing with the data centers, with AI, and is our system really keeping up? I bet you might be doing some work on that and can share it with us.
Absolutely. We'll be glad to do so.
Good. Well, folks, we appreciate you listening today. I'm glad to say the grit shown by the men and women in oil and natural gas working in the field kept the lights on. The men and women in our power plants work 24/7. Good things happen there. It's a success story that every Texan should be proud of. Natural gas proved once again that it's not just a bridge fuel. Natural gas is the anchor of our grid and the anchor of our economy. Dr. Foreman, thank you again. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you next time. That's it for today. We appreciate you joining in to TXOGA Talks, where energy meets insight.
The views expressed on this podcast are not intended and should not be construed to be the views of any particular TXOGA member or company. The purpose of this podcast is to engage in candid conversations about energy needs, energy security, and the future of energy.